because we're halfway through our season doesn't mean we don't have time to take a look at the numbers, right? And I mean, and it's not just from a mowing standpoint, but we're going to talk about how that affects any service anybody provides, whether you're doing fertilization and weed control, aeration, seeding, snow and ice management, de-icing. Math just comes into play with a lot of it, right?
Exactly. And I think for everybody listening right now, whether you're listening with us live or you're listening to the replay later, I know a lot of you have probably a lot of trauma and negative experiences when you think back to your experience in your math classrooms. Maybe even as early as elementary school. It starts early for some people, just depending on the teachers they have or the school they went to, or, how it was perceived by their parents. So just kind of a side note for any parents out there, be careful how you talk about math, especially because what really bothers me is I've never once heard a parent say, well, that's okay that you can't read. No, I can't read either. It's not a big deal.
Right, right.
But I hear all the time from people, well, I don't know how to do math either. It's stupid. So just don't worry about it.
Yeah. I've never thought about in raising 4 kids, I never once said, well, I'm not sure about reading or I'm not sure about whatever.
History, anything.
It's always math.
That's dismissed. Exactly.
That's dismissed. And you brought up a good point earlier as we were just talking about, doing this, that we use math in so many different ways in our business. I mean, we don't think of a lot of things being math. I think I was getting a little water. I asked Katie to get me a little water. She's laughing there. I asked her to get me a little water before we came on because, we were just getting everything set up, and I said, I don't need a whole lot, just, less than a half's fine. And her math skills went to work.
Well, I said, I'm just going to fill it up anyway, because it's going to save you another trip to the fridge later. So that's number one, is let's save time where we can. And number 2 is that the more you fill it up, the less time it's going to take for the water to travel through the straw to get to you. So you might as well fill it to the top.
So it's like when I'm using my tip and pour, like I would do like with chemicals, my tip and pour water here gets to my lip sooner, so I don't have to tip as far.
Exactly.
So see, she's always thinking. And for you guys that are using any of our products with Profits Unlimited, for an example, like our quick estimators for snow and ice or landscaping or, our snow and ice management or whatever it is, and our know why you charge what you charge to calculate cost. Katie's responsible for all the math to that. I always joke and say, I'm a lawn guy. I'm a lawn guy. And I say that with all due respect, So even thinking about filling your water up, she's thinking about the time it's going to, the math behind, okay, well, hey, it don't need to take as long to get there, right?
Exactly. Now, let me ask you a quick question, and everybody out there listening, think about this, what your response would be to this too, while Wayne gives us his response here. Would you say that you were a quote unquote good student in high school? And take a second to think about that, because I know it's been a minute, but
yeah, it has. God, that goes all the way back to, let's say I got out of high school in 1981. Most of these guys listening probably weren't even born yet.
I know I sure wasn't.
No, let's see. Was I a good student? Or let's rephrase that a little bit, because see, she's hitting me with these questions, and I'm sure there'll be more that I didn't have time to prepare myself for. Are we talking about a good math student or a good student?
Let's go with both. So overall, would you say that either your own parents or your friends, would they say, oh, Wayne was a good student? And then what is that reflection you have of yourself? Do you perceive yourself to be quote unquote good as a student and then quote unquote good at math?
I would say I was a solid average student. I wasn't a brainiac. Where I went to school, here in Louisville, I went to Trinity High School. It was a Catholic boys' high school. They had I think 9 different what they called tracks that you could be positioned in based on your mental capacity,
quote unquote ability,
quote unquote.
And that's the other thing too is a lot of people get nervous because they get on a particular track, and that makes them feel like they are either good or not good at certain things based on that track that they're placed in.
And I was predominantly in 5-track, so I was in the middle,
right.
So and the thing about it is you did better, or if you were constantly exceeding at that level, they'd want to move you up,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't have the I don't know what you'd call it. I
The
didn't,
drive, maybe.
yeah, probably. I didn't want to get moved up.
You didn't want to have to work harder in that next level.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and,
that's fair.
and so not that I probably couldn't have been in a higher track, but I elected to stay where I was
Mhm.
at, and I tried to convince my parents that I needed to stay where I was at. And so they had me move along in a couple things. But anyways, I predominantly stayed in that 5 track there. So I would say I was probably just a good, solid, average student. Uh, the only class that I got a D in was Kentucky history. And
Wow.
living here. So that was my D, but I passed. Mr. Woods, he was about 117 years old. But the funny part about it is it was my worst class grade wise, but it was a senior elective that I took it, because I had my core. So I took it and, but I remember quite a bit out of it is the funny thing about it, even though it was my worst graded class, I guess.
Mhm.
Now, as far as math, how do I perceive myself in math? I would say probably a solid average in that class as well. My highest level of high school math was I had a trigonometry class. And what I remember from trigonometry is 3 things: sine, cosine, and tangents. Right?
Yeah, that's a solid one that most people remember.
So other than that, I don't remember anything else, but I mean, not because I didn't probably know it then.
Right. It just didn't retain over the years.
So yeah, but I do remember sine, cosine, and tangents. So whatever that is, but we're not going to bore our listeners.
Yes,
with that.
please don't tune out. Okay, we're
Yeah.
not going to get too deep into the math. But if you don't mind, if you haven't already, shoot us a text and let us know if you think you are good or not good at math. Or if you remember
Yeah.
any things like sine, cosine, and tangent.
Yeah, seriously, guys, do that. Don't make me do this all by myself with her, because we're getting ready to talk about some fun stuff. So,
I can see the fear and the anxiety bubbling up in him, and that's not uncommon. So if that's you sitting there right now, like, oh my God, please don't make me think about that again.
Yeah.
Let me just say again, like I did at the top, put that fear away, because at the end of the day, what Profits Unlimited's work does for you is take away that fear factor.
Yeah.
We know the math. We've done the math. You're going to enter your company's specific information, and then we're just going to do some basic addition, subtraction, percentages, fractions. I tell people all the time, fractions are your friends. Don't be scared.
Yeah.
Especially, when you talked about it earlier, Wayne, mixing chemicals and things like that. You have to be comfortable with proportions. You have to be comfortable with percentages. But there's so much that people fear from their high school math courses. It's just that sit and get mentality. Do 30 problems. Boom, the class bell rings, you're done. It feels so disconnected to their lives sometimes that you feel like you might not be able to use it. You don't store it away in that long-term memory to actually retain it because you don't feel like it's important.
Right.
So we're not going to sit here and lecture you and give you a pop quiz and tell you to figure out 30%.
But I do want to
whatever.
know, hey, shoot us a text, 502-550-8307 on how do you perceive yourself in math?
Mhm.
Good, bad, average, don't care.
Yeah.
You're going to do it like everybody else does it, and just, I'll let my competitor bid the job and I'll beat them by 5%.
Because I think that's some of what keeps people for so long from seeking, a professional help, like something from Profits Unlimited, because they have that unrequited.
We got a text in. We're ready.
I've been, they're fearful of that math. They didn't have positive experiences of school, so they don't want to even, kind of open that doorway. But again, like I said, we're not going to be asking you to do the math. The spreadsheets, the software don't ask you to do the math yourself. We just need the company specific information from you so that we can take that burden off your shoulders and do those basic calculations for you so that you know what it costs to do your job.
So when somebody, let's just dive into this for a second, because got a funny text. Well, not a funny text, but a reality text from somebody. And I'm not going to throw any names out there, but to Katie's point, we all do math all the time
Yeah.
and don't realize it. This guy says, I quit school at 18. I was in prison, I realized I'd been using math quite well, just quite illegally.
Yeah. And I think that's something a lot of people don't realize is
How many times you do?
how much you really are thinking like a mathematician without consciously processing that you're doing math.
Well, like you said earlier today when we were kind of talking about this a little bit about going to get your hair done.
Yeah, so I was I was getting ready to leave the office for an appointment last week, and Kyle and Wayne were in the office talking about truckloads of mulch versus bags of mulch, and I was like, you know what, I'm really envious of that because as much as I am a mathematician and I teach math myself, geometry, that visualization skill isn't my strong suit. I'm very much more formulated for algebra. Plug and chug, give me those numbers, let me interpret these results. That's my skill set. So I'm really envious of you guys in this industry that can just take a look at a landscaping bed and be like, that's going to take 2 yards of mulch, or that's going to be
10 yards of mulch, or 25 bags.
Yeah.
And we're good at that. Like you said, I mean, we don't even realize it's geometry.
Exactly.
That we're doing, or we look at a yard and say, it's going to take me an hour and a half, or a property and say, well, it's going to take us 3 hours.
Yeah.
And so we're doing the math in our mind subconscious. I don't know if is it subconscious?
Yeah. You're doing the math. You're using those estimating skills. You're using some of the basic formulas that this industry thrives on, which is volume, surface area. Like you were talking about earlier with the lights, knowing your linear feet. Yeah. Those are basic things that I think a lot of people don't give themselves credit for knowing and being able to do, because I couldn't tell you how far away we're sitting right now. It could be a foot. It could be 3 meters. I really don't even know because that's not my skill. I don't visualize very well.
Yeah.
So you all are using mathematical skills every single day. You just need to get those to the top of where you need to be so that you can maximize that profit.
Right.